Page caching is one of the most efficient forms of caching in a Rails app because it means future requests do not have to hit the Rails app at all. The way it works is that the entire content of a page is cached into a file, which is then served up by the front-end web server. So let's get started by adding some page caching to this page right here, which just displays a list of products. First of all, caching is turned off by default in the development environment. So if you want to experiment with caching in development, you'll need to first enable it, which is by setting this perform caching line to true inside of the development config file. And then you'll need to restart your Rails app for that change to take effect. Now we can add page caching, which is very easy to do. Just go into the controller, in this case the products controller, and call caches page at the top here and specify which action you want to cache. In this case, the index action, which lists the products. Now you can list as many actions as you want here as well, so we could say we want to cache the show action as well, which displays an individual product. So we can try this out by reloading this products list here. The first time it's going to serve it up like normal and then write the cache file, and then every time we reload afterwards it's just going to read from that cache file. Same goes for the show action. First time it'll write the cache and then it'll read from it on every subsequent request. By default, this will cache the files in the public directory, so if you open that up, you can see that there's a products.html file that just contains the full response of that products page, and then each individual product that we access will be written here as well. And normally, this public directory is set up to serve static files by the front-end web server, so this will be nice and fast. One issue you may have is that any extra URL parameters you pass in will be ignored. For example, let's say we have some pagination. Then if we try to click next page here, and notice it added page equals 2 to the URL, but is serving up the same static list of pages, which is that first page. To get around this, we'll need to include the page as part of the URL path instead of a query parameter. So it might look like page as 1 or 2, for example, for setting the page. So we can make that change by adding a new route to the top of our routes file. So let's make all GET requests that match product/page/the page number to the products index action. Now it's important that this be above the resources products here so that it takes precedence when it generates the URL. And I'll need to remove the products HTML cache file so it'll generate one with the proper URL. So now when I go to the products listing page again and then click the pagination links, it works because now the page is part of the URL, so it's going to each individual page and caching it separately instead of having one index page. Next, let's talk about cache expiration, because if the dynamic content of this cache changes, let's say we edit this product here, then we'll need to flush the cache because it's going to still serve up the old cache file without that new change. One place to expire a cache is inside of the controller when the product changes. So let's say inside of the update action here, when the product saves successfully, we need to flush that page cache. And we can do so by calling expire page, and then we can pass in either a hash of options like you would to URL4 or a path. And my preference is usually to do a path. So that's what I'll do here. Like the product's path, you can pass that in. And maybe for the show action, we need to expire that too. We can just pass in the product path like this. And so that will expire both that index page and that show page. So let's try this again. I'll edit this product again, and now let's change the name, update the product, and now it looks like it updated successfully, and when I go to that specific product, that works as well. So it successfully flushed both of those page caches. Now we still have a few issues here. One is that if I go back here, you can see that this flash message is actually now included in the new cache when we went back to the index page. So you can see if I reload this page as many times as we want, this flash message will show up all the time, which really is not good, and I'll discuss how you can change that and fix that later on in this episode. Another issue is that there are a few caches lying around that did not get flushed. For example, our pages. If I go to the next page and go back to the first page, you can see it's falling back to an old page cache because this URL is different. It doesn't match the simple products index URL. And I also have a root URL, which I haven't shown you before, a home page, and that goes to the same products index list, which was also not flushed. So you really need to be careful here and make sure to expire every URL that could possibly point to that page. So we have our root URL and our product/page that needs to be flushed for each individual page. So the pages are pretty tricky because if we look at each page is cached separately, so we'll need to flush all of these files at one time. Now we could loop through each one, but there can be any number of pages and it'll be easier just to manually remove the full page directory here. So I'll do that with a call to file utils dot remove rf, and then I can actually call something called page cache directory, which is the directory to the page caches because it's configurable, so it's good to call that, and then just remove that products page directory there. So now when I go to edit a product again, it'll properly flush all the caches, updating the name for each one. You can see if I go to that specific page, that works. Or if I go to the root URL, that'll work too, giving the proper name for the product that was updated. Now we also need to flush this cache in the create and destroy actions because those change the product as well. But instead of scattering all these same lines throughout the controller, it's better to move this off into what's called a sweeper. It'll be a lot cleaner. So I like to place sweepers inside of the app directory, make a new folder here called sweepers, like that, and then make a new file here. I'll call it product sweeper.rb. So I'll just make that class in here called product sweeper, and this needs to inherit from action controller caching sweeper. And the way this works is that you observe a given model. So we can say observe the product model, and you can pass in multiple models in here as well. And then you can override various callback methods to detect when a product changes. So we could say after update, for example, and then the product will be passed in here, and then sweep the cache inside of here. So I'll just extract out these lines from the controller, and then move them off into the sweeper here, like this. And I need to fix this up so that it uses the product that's passed in. And basically all method calls inside of here are going to be delegated to the controller so we can access the expire page and the paths and so on. Now we want this to apply to after create and after destroy as well. Now instead of defining those each separately here, what I like to do is just make one method called sweep, and then use alias method like this, and then just pass in after update and alias it to sweep. And then we could do the same thing for after create, and then after destroy, and so on here. So now with this in place, whenever a product is created, updated, or destroyed, it will sweep the entire cache with this one method call. Now there's one change we need to make, and that is back inside of the controller. At the top here, we need to call cache sweeper, and then pass the name of the sweeper here, like this. So that way it knows to set up the sweeper for all of these actions and to watch the products inside of here. Now you may need to restart the server for it to pick up that new sweeper, but once you do, and then you change a product or create it or destroy it, it's going to flush that cache just like you want, updating the name everywhere. Now there's one more issue left to resolve, and that has to do with the flash message, because right now it's being stored inside of the cache so it'll show up all the time, and we don't want that. So it's inside of my application layout file here where I'm outputting that flash message. And I would like some way to hide this message when we're doing page caching. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a good way to detect whether or not the page caching is enabled, so what I recommend doing is just setting up a before filter only on those specific actions, in this case index and show actions, and then setting maybe an instance variable here called page caching and set it to true, so that way you're able to detect it in the layout file and hide that flash message if the page caching is set up to do that. And you can hide other parts of this layout file as well, such as the CSRF meta token up here. Just say unless page caching up here too, because CSRF meta token is again something else that's specific to this given user, and you probably don't want it in the cache. So now when we generate a new cache, I'll update a product here. Hey, no flash message, and when I view the source, there's no CSRF meta token in here either. So those were successfully hidden only on pages where we're doing page caching. Now there may be times when you do want to include some dynamic user-specific content on a page that's page cached like this, such as a flash message, or maybe you have a login user status on the top right, for example, and that is possible if you want to use some JavaScript like I show in episode 169. I'll probably be revising that episode next week as well. Well, that's all I have for you on the topic of page caching. Thanks for watching.